Hello and welcome back to the channel. This video is going to be the first of the athletics actions videos that I'm going to be doing, and this is going to be covering the trip action. The trip athletics action targets your opponent's reflex DC, and on a success, your opponent falls prone. On a critical success, you also deal your opponent 1d6 bludgeoning damage. Prone in PF2 causes you to be flat-footed, so that's a -2 to your AC, as well as take a -2 to all attack rolls. Additionally, the only move actions you can take are crawling or standing. Prone is generally one of the more powerful conditions to inflict any TTRPG, and PF2 is no exception. Flat-footed and -2 on all attack rolls is really good in and of themselves. Also, because your opponent generally does not like to be prone on the ground, especially if they're surrounded by melee combatants, they'll want to stand up. Standing is a move action which provokes any attacks of opportunities that you happen to have. So if your fighter is standing on top of your opponent that you've just knocked to the ground, as soon as they try and stand up, your fighter gets a free attack on them and full multiple attack penalty. This is why Trip is so useful in Pathfinder 2nd Edition, is because attacks of opportunity are really powerful in the system, and a lot of martial classes have access to it and will be incentivized to pick it up. Thus, Trip as a way to apply prone to your enemies is an easy and accessible way to combo with the attacks of opportunities that your martial characters are going to have. So let's see just how much we can invest into tripping our opponents in Pathfinder 2nd Edition. As a reminder, any feats that cover athletics actions in general I've already covered in my athletics overview guide that came out a couple weeks ago. So if you're wondering, for example, I don't mention Titan Wrestler in this video, you can go back to that video and see all the feats that I found and cover just athletics actions broadly. As for feats that cover Trip specifically, let's start with Inventive Offensive, a first level gnome feat which lets you spend 3 actions to add the Trip trait to a melee weapon that you wield. Now this is pretty expensive to do action economy wise, and it only lasts until you first hit and deal damage with the weapon. However, if you want to open up combat with a trip attempt on an opponent, and you also want to use a weapon that doesn't inherently have the trip trait, Inventive Offensive can be a good way to do so, especially if you have other plans in the middle of combat besides doing just athletics actions over and over again. Next we have Tailspin, a level 5 Goblin feat, which allows you for 2 actions to attempt to trip 2 opponents simultaneously. However, if you roll a success against a target to trip them, you automatically get a critical success, dealing that extra bludgeoning damage upon the trip. Next we have Ricochet Leap, a level 9 Gripply feat, which allows you to use the wall jump skill feat to jump off of creatures larger than you, as well as physical walls. Since Gripply are a small anti-street, this is pretty easy to do. Additionally, once per turn, when you do make this wall jump off of a creature, you can trip them as a free action. Next up, the class feats. And starting with Barbarian, at level 12 we have Unbalancing Sweep, which allows you for 3 actions to shove or trip 3 adjacent foes simultaneously. Now while this is the same action cost as just making 3 separate trip attempts, the key part about this is that it does not increase your multiple attack penalty until after everything is resolved. Meaning if you want to control the space around you as much as possible, you can take on Balancing Sweep and spend your entire turn performing athletics actions on opponents with no repercussions in terms of multiple attack penalty. Next at level 14 we have Awesome Blow, which when you use Knockback, which is an automatic shove after you hit an enemy, allows you to also make a free trip attempt against that target. Next up we have the Fighter with their level 4 feat Knockdown, which for 2 actions allows you to strike an enemy, and if you hit, attempt to trip them with no multiple attack penalty. This leads to a level 10 improved knockdown, which forgoes the need to make the check to trip and just automatically critically succeeds on the trip attempt, assuming you hit that initial strike, which as a fighter with your increased proficiency, you are significantly more likely to do than other classes. Next up is the monk, with their reflective ripple stance, which is their only stance that has an unarmed attack with the trip trait. Additionally, while you're in the stance, you get a free +1 circumstance bonus to any attempt to trip your opponents. This leads to level 8 Rippling Spin, which as a reaction after you're hit by a melee attack, you can step and then automatically attempt to trip the attacker. And finally, at level 12, Reflective Ripple Monks can also pick up Wave Spiral, which allows you to attempt to trip everyone within 10 feet of you. Next up we have the Rogue, which at level 4 gets the harder they fall, allowing you to deal extra bludgeoning damage both on a successful trip and a critical trip. Notably, when you critically succeed your trip, you deal your sneak attack damage to your opponent, not just the normal trip damage. And as your rogue advances levels, that sneak attack damage will become quite a large amount. And at level 6, rogues also get shoved down, which allows you to make a free trip attempt against an opponent that you have just successfully shoved. And finally, the summoner at level 10 gets weighty impact, which gives you Eidolon knockdown action for an attack with which they have the trip trait. Now this knockdown is unlike the fighter's knockdown, which in the fact that it automatically succeeds. So long as your Eidolon has just hit an opponent with that specific attack, they can spend an action to automatically knock down that opponent with no chance of failure. And now moving on to the different archetypes, starting with Martial, which at level 10 gets the topple foe reaction, which, if an ally succeeds in a melee strike against an opponent you're both adjacent to, allows you to make a trip attempt against the target of the strike. Now this is especially powerful with attacks of opportunities because the way it works is your opponent will get to stand up, your ally will make the attack of opportunity, and assuming they hit, you will be able to take your reaction to trip that creature before they get a chance to take further actions. Meaning if you succeed, your opponent has just wasted an action to stand up, taken an attack of opportunity from your ally, and is back on the floor again, right where they started. Next up is the Mauler archetype, which gives you access to knockdown and improved knockdown as per the fighter, as well as unbalancing sweep as per barbarian. However, it also has a unique feat, Hammerquake at level 14, which for 3 actions allows you to attempt a trip attempt against everyone in a 3x3 area. And finally we have Staff Acrobat, which is an uncommon archetype centered around making really good at using staves for weapons. For the dedication, whenever you're wielding your staff, you automatically get a +2 to any athletics checks to high jump, leap, long jump, as well as shove or trip without a free hand. At level 4, you get Bullying Staff, which allows you to shove or trip creatures that are larger than you. This is a little bit counterfeited by the Titan Wrestler skill feat. However, if you're, for example, playing with free archetype where you have archetype feats to spare, and your skill feats are kinda tight, this is a good pickup to basically transfer one to the other. Next we have Staff Sweep at level 6, which for 1 action allows you to make 1 athletics check to shove or trip 2 adjacent foes simultaneously. At level 8 we have Levering Strike, which allows you to make an attack and even if you fail, so long as you don't critically fail, your opponent becomes flat-footed and takes a -2 to his DCs to shove, trip, and tumble through until the start of your next turn. Meaning if you follow up with a trip, you're all that much more likely to succeed. And finally, at level 14, we have Pivot Strike, which allows you to leap, strike, and trip, all for 2 actions. Now, as always, I want to kind of outline how I would create a character if I wanted to invest in tripping as much as possible. Unfortunately, there aren't any obvious classes that have just a ton of trip feats available to us, but of all the choices available, I think I'm going to go with Fighter, because they get attack of opportunity for free at first level. What this means is that unlike other martial classes, who you have to wait until around level 4 to 6 to gain their attacks of opportunity, Fighter can immediately take advantage of that knocking prone, requiring a move action to stand back up, granting us a free attack whenever we successfully trip an opponent. Of course, I'm taking knockdown and improving knockdown as soon as I can to allow me to strike and then trip first without multiple attack penalty, and then with an automatic critical success whenever I attempt to use this against an opponent. I'm also very tempted to invest in the martial archetype, specifically for that level 10 feet top foe, meaning that if we don't have another use of our reaction, and we didn't manage to knock down our opponent on our turn, then we can, especially if we have melee allies, not attempt extra knockdown attempts for free on our opponent's turn. I might even take the monk dedication as well on my tripping character, which at level 4, with the basic kata feat, allows us to pick up that reflective rebel stance, which so long as we're in it grants another +1 to our trip attempts. This notably requires us to be unarmored, which means our EC is going to be somewhere between 1 and 3 points lower than it would be otherwise, but free bonuses to trip are just free bonuses to trip. Now notably, taking all these feats does take a very long time. Improve and knockdown and topple 4 are both level 10 feats, which means if you want both of them and you aren't playing with free archetype, you're going to be level 12 at the earliest before you can get them both online. However, even before that, you're still a fighter that can trip your foes, provide excellent crowd control, and via the rest of the martial archetype, be kind of an inspiring leader among your allies, granting them bonuses to things that they do, depending on which martial stance you're in. So overall, the options for tripping in PF2 kind of are few and far between. The automatic trips that Fighter and Summary both get, in my opinion, put them head and shoulders above basically any other class that's trying to invest into tripping, because not having to roll for a trip attempt, and especially not having to deal with the multiple attack penalty, is really the game in the system of Pathfinder 2nd Edition, which is in large part about managing these things like action economy, multiple attack penalty, and so on and so forth. However, Trip is so strong already that it kind of is worth to do even if you haven't invested anything into it besides just athletics increases. And having these other feats as a bonus, kind of side grades to the already amazing Trip action, is probably where it should be in the system in my opinion. So thank you all for watching. The next time I believe we'll be covering the grapple action, as is my second favorite of the athletics actions available in the system. So I hope you'll come back to see that video. But until next time, hope you all have a lovely day.